you want to overcome your anxious thoughts? Anxious thoughts are something everyone experiences at times, and feeling anxious is a perfectly natural reaction to some situations. In our fast-paced world where we're constantly overstimulated, anxiety disorders are affecting more and more of us. This means that our minds and bodies are constantly being subjected to the fight or flight response that primes our body ready for action. When you're stressed, your brain responds by prompting the release of cortisol, nature's built-in alarm system. And this alarm system evolved to help animals facing physical threats. And it increased their respiration rate, it raised their heartbeat, and directed the blood flow from the abdominal organs to muscles to help confront or escape the clear and present danger. These protective actions stimulate the sympathetic nervous system and put the body on high alert. But when this alarm system goes off too often and indiscriminately, the chronic overstimulation can result in all manner of physical ills, as well as increasing our anxiety. But the good news is there are plenty of things you can learn to do that will help you to manage your anxiety more effectively when your alarm system does go off. So welcome to this week's video. I'm Diane from Trilogy Life Coaching, and today I'd like to talk to you about ANTS. Yes, I definitely said ANTS. ANTS is simply an acronym for automatic negative thoughts. If you suffer from automatic negative thoughts and would like to know more about how to change those negative thoughts in order to change your life, then watch to the end to hear my top tips on how to start doing this. So the first question that I want to ask today is, what is anxiety? Anxiety is a feeling of unease, like a worry or a fear that can be mild or can be severe. And everyone feels anxious from time to time, of course, but it usually passes once the situation is over. It can make our heart race and we might feel sweaty or shaky or short of breath. And anxiety can also cause changes in our behaviour, such as becoming overly careful or avoiding things that trigger anxiety. Sometimes feelings of anxiety can be constant and overwhelming or out of proportion to the situation, and then this can affect your daily life in a negative way. The anxiety will feel more intense or overwhelming, and often it can interfere with our everyday lives and our relationships. So question number 2 is, what are the signs of anxiety? Anxiety can show itself in a variety of ways, and you may have experienced some of these: feeling tired or irritable, feel a sense of dread, be unable to make decisions, have trouble sleeping, you might feel sick or dizzy, sweaty or short of breath, and sometimes you might experience it as headaches or tummy aches, and you'll find that you're avoiding situations that you don't want to be in. You might have some difficulty sleeping. You might experience this as an irregular heartbeat, have pins and needles or a dry mouth, or repeatedly start checking things or seeking assurance from others. And question number 3, what causes anxiety? Well, it's our body's natural reaction to perceived danger. It's focusing our attention and giving us a rush of adrenaline to react. This is called the fight or flight response. And sometimes it can be difficult to know what is making you anxious, which can be stressful in itself. And that's why learning to recognise what is making you anxious can help you deal with uncertainty of a perceived threat better. There are lots of things that can influence our mental and our emotional health, such as our upbringing, our childhood environment, things that happen to us, and even our own temperament. However, if your anxiety is affecting your daily life or causing you great mental and emotional distress, then I want to recommend that you should consider seeking further support from a medical or mental health practitioner. So here are my top tips to help you start to overcome your anxious thoughts. And the first top tip is that I want you to challenge your anxious thoughts. So tackling unhelpful thoughts is one of the best things we can do to feel less anxious. Dr. Daniel Amen, who's an American psychiatrist, describes these unhelpful thoughts as automatic negative thoughts that rob people of their joy and steal their happiness. And he started teaching his patients how to eliminate all of these ants because they're what drive depression and anxiety and negativity in our lives. So if you want to be free from anxiety and negativity in your life, you need to discipline your mind to get rid of the ants that are crawling around in your brain like an infestation of real ants that seem impossible to get rid of. Dr. Amen teaches that it's possible to develop your own personal anteaters and teach them how to patrol the streets of your mind. But first of all, how do you actually identify your ants? So the first ant I want to talk to you about is the fortune-telling ant. Yes, I did say fortune-telling. So the fortune-telling ants are masterful at predicting the worst, even though they don't have any evidence. And predicting the worst, even though you don't know what will happen, is the hallmark of the fortune-telling ant. So an example could be, I just had a biopsy and I'm 100% sure that it's cancer. There are no results yet, but you're assuming that it's going to turn out to be the worst case scenario. Another one is, if I fail this exam, I will never achieve anything in my life again. And the second ant that I want to talk to you about is the mind-reading ant. Yes, I said mind-reading ant. This is where you believe that you know what someone else is thinking, and when they didn't even tell you. Now, it's a major reason why people have trouble in their relationships. So for an example, a friend or work colleague is feeling ill and looks cross and grumpy. You say to yourself, look at that face he or she is pulling. They really don't like me. I've been there, and I'm sure many of you have too. Now, the third ant that I want to talk about is the guilt-beating ant. Thinking with words like, I should, I must, I ought, and have to. So you're using guilt to control your own behaviour. But guilt isn't actually a very good motivator for change. It only serves to make you feel weighed down with more negativity. Guilt beatings are when people have a psychological tendency to employ self-punishment to ward off their guilty feelings. So for example, let's say you find yourself feeling guilty because you were gossiping about a friend, and you end up feeling guilty for days and weeks and months and even for years over this one incident. You move yourself out of that friendship circle with no explanation because you are crushed by the guilt every time you see the friend you gossiped about. And this guilt takes on a life of its own, and you've punished yourself to ward off the guilt instead of forgiving yourself for a minor lapse in judgment. The fourth ant that I want to talk to you about is the blame ant. When you blame someone else for your problems, so you feel as though you are the victim, then you can't do anything to change it. The blame game rarely helps us. You need to take personal responsibility for changing the problems that you have. So for example, it's your fault I'm out of shape because you won't come to the gym with me. And whenever you begin a sentence with, it's your fault, your mind is filled with negative and toxic thoughts. So ant number 5 is the labelling ant. Do you ever call yourself negative names? I know I do. As we know, labels are always very harmful. Speaking this way to yourself hurts your ability to see situations clearly, and it wounds your self-esteem, which in turn then worsens the anxiety that you're feeling. So for example, do you ever use the labels, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm a failure, to define yourself? When you do this regularly without thinking, you don't realise the impact it has on your emotional and mental health. So then the million-dollar question is, how do we begin to kill off our ants? First of all, whenever you find yourself feeling mad or sad or nervous, or your thoughts are racing out of control, write down what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and then try to identify which ant species is infesting your mind and talk back to it. And I mean really talk out loud to it. For example, where is the evidence for this? I'm not stupid, I just failed a stupid test. And then, once you've done that, find something to do that occupies your hands or your mind, or preferably both. Distract yourself with baking, cooking, dinner, listening to music, praying, phoning or calling a friend on Zoom. Do some work or exercise, read, use an activity book, do some cleaning, watch a movie, do a hobby, or meditate. But it needs to be a task that requires a level of focus. With the right task, you will usually be able to surrender those ants very quickly after you've talked out loud to them. And finally, I want you to regain your power over these ants. Challenging negative thoughts, that is killing the ants, takes away their power and gives you control over your thoughts, your moods, your behaviours and your actions. And learning how to kill the ants and develop an internal anteater has been shown in scientific studies to be as effective as antidepressant medication to treat anxiety and depression. And that has to be good news for us all. So this week's challenge: when you find yourself feeling mad, sad, nervous or out of control, write down what you are thinking about and what you are feeling. And then try to identify which ant species is infesting your mind and talk back to it. I mean really talk out loud to it. So for example, my work colleague has only ever been pleasant and helpful to me. I have absolutely no reason to believe that he or she hates me. Maybe it's her time of the month, or he was up with a sick baby all night. We all have our off days, so I'm not going to give it another thought or worry about it any longer. As always, let me know in the comments how you get on. That's it for today. See you in the next video, and wishing you all health, wealth and happiness for your week ahead.